Okay, that's all.
Okay. Um, so what I wanted to present on today was getting started with vibe coding. Um, so I know that JP and some others have been using Cursor quite a bit, which is kind of a precursor to a lot of the new other tools that have come out over the last 3 or 4 months for vibe coding. So I'll go over a couple of them and kind of give a start to show you kind of what I was doing with it and then what you might want to do. You can take these in a lot of different directions. And I was looking specifically at 3 different tools. So Google released Gemini CLI, which is their command line interface for Gemini. Claude Code has probably been around the longest of these, which kind of was part of what got Cursor started, but then it branched off and became its own thing. And then OpenAI has Codex, which is what they call theirs. Um, yeah, I guess the easiest way is just to kind of show what they do. And so let me share my computer. And I'll go ahead and pull up my terminal. I'll go ahead and start a new window. There we go. Okay, so when you decide to use any of these tools, you do have to install a couple of things onto your computer to get them started. The nice thing is each of them pretty well lays it out at the very beginning of when you go to this. So Gemini, they have a GitHub repo because theirs is free and open source up to a limit. So with Gemini, you will have access to their Gemini 2.5 Pro up till you hit 1 million tokens, and then they downgrade you to the Gemini 2 not Pro, which is still a good model. It's not a great model, but it's a good model. But the first 1 million tokens can take you pretty far. And I believe that's per day. So like if you go back the next day, you can get another, I believe. I haven't pushed it that far. But again, you have to do some installs of a couple of different packages to get started. You have to have Node.js for all 3 of them. So you will have to install that on your machine. Currently, I think everyone other than the OpenAI Codex supports Mac, Linux, and Windows. The Codex only supports Mac and Linux. They don't have a Windows version running of Codex.
Are they under Microsoft?
Yeah, I don't get it. But I don't use Windows anyway, so it didn't really matter to me. But just in looking at their information. But once you get started and you get them installed, it is really pretty easy to work with after that. So if you go into your command line, for example, so how these work is they work within the directory that you put them into. So they have access to that directory that you're in. You can give them access to other directories, and they'll ask for that access if they don't have permissions. So if you want them to make a new directory, it'll ask, can I get permissions to make the new directory? Safety reasons, I'm not sure like if you would necessarily want to give them access to too many directories. So I have them running on my local drive, but I don't keep really almost anything there. So I'm not too worried about security because everything is really kept on a cloud drive anyway that I don't give it access to. But yeah, it is kind of taking over your machine when you run these. So for example, if I list my directories, let me move that far out of the way. So I'll go into what I have, Python projects. And so now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and make a directory that I'll call here. Let me see.
Are any of these officially approved for use by GWIT?
Probably not. So yeah, I wouldn't do anything with GW data with them. But yeah, that's half the fun. If anyone from GWIT's on, just ignore that I said that. So I'll make a directory and I'll call it demo Gemini. Oh, that's Gemini, make directory. Demo Gemini. And I'll go into it. And now I'm in the directory that I want to give it access to, and then I just write Gemini. And now it gets started. And so now I am using the command line interface to theirs. And it's in a directory that I'm going to have it have access to. So, and what I actually did was, so you can prompt it to do things, to create different types of programs or whatever for you. So I went ahead and for this quick demo, I just said, create a multi-line Python project that will convert currency, make sure it has at least like a main file and a converter file. I said to write PyTest for it and so forth. So I just paste that in of what I wanted to do. And then it will get started working in the background doing all of this. So it's doing all the requirements and so forth. And it will ask me a lot of these questions. Like it wants to write to a JSON thing. And so I'll just tell it to always do that. So I'm actually not going to show as it runs because it's kind of boring and it'll ask me lots of questions. So what I will show though instead is the bigger project that we were using this for, and then I'll show you what the results were from the 3 of them. So as you can see, it asks for a lot of permissions. So it won't pip install without your permission. So the project that we were doing, I'm working with a colleague in social psychology, and we want to do a large scale yeah, just bring it up. We wanted to do a large-scale project related to exploratory factor analysis of 50 different psychology instruments. So exploratory factor analysis lets you take questions on a survey and figure out kind of how they group together and what are the factors within. But we wanted to do this on a large scale. And we wanted to use personas to do that. So we got a data set of 1,000 personas, and we wanted to have them then get ready to answer questions from all 50 of these different psychological surveys. With the goal of, again, narrowing that down. So I had to write the software to get this to happen. So I tried out 3 of these tools to do it. And so it's in my Git repo and you can see it there. And I gave each of them a different branch of it. And then I've just left these branches there. So I did a Gemini branch, a Claude branch, and a Codex branch. And I asked them to basically write all the things that we wanted it to do. So now if I can get back to the right window. Yeah. I thought I had the instructions that I gave it up. Let me go to my drive. Okay, so here are the instructions that I gave each of them. And I gave each of them the same set of instructions. I said, here is the goal. We want to create Python code that will generate 1,000 synthetic personas. Each persona will take a series of psychological instruments, 1,000 plus items across the multiple instruments. I told it where I wanted it in my Git repo. I said that I had a persona data set that I wanted it to extract the data from. So I described what the data set looked like. And then I gave the instruments, which were just from a Google spreadsheet. Oh, that's the wrong spreadsheet. Well, I have a Google spreadsheet that has all the instruments, and my colleagues' students went through and put all the items for each of the subscales and all of that in there. I wanted it to use PyTest. I wanted it to use rough as my linter, black as my decoder, my code formatter, and so forth. So I told it specifically, and I used ChatGPT to say kind of what would a file structure potentially look like, and it gave me a file structure, which I gave them to, which turned out to be really helpful because they did use the file structure pretty well. So I said, step one, convert the data sets, and this is kind of what I want the JSON file to look like. So take the data set of all these personas, put it into a JSON file. And as you can see, I ended up writing, when it was all said and done, like 8 pages of instructions, telling it very specifically what I want it to accomplish. And it turned out ChatGPT was really good at writing this too. So it may look like a long time, but it really wasn't. I just had to keep saying like, no, I don't really want that. Can you fix that? And one of the more tricky parts is that I wasn't sure of at the beginning was like, do I want each time they answer a question for it to act as like a raw API call? So no context history, like each answer is a raw call. Or did I want it to actually remember what it had answered the prior questions as, because that was part of the persona? So I asked it to create several conditions that I could then test against to see what I wanted. So I copied and pasted each of these into first Gemini and then Claude and then Codex. And then these are the results that I got from that. So if I go to my Gemini branch, so this is what it produced. So again, it produced all of this on my machine, and then I just had it push it to Git. So as you can see, it created the prompts folder, and it created, this will become the prompt. It created a very simple prompt to get started. In the scripts folder, it created where to convert the personas, how to convert the instruments, then how to generate the prompts so that each time it prompts, it uses a custom prompt for that. And then the run simulation kind of runs all the other pieces put together. And it created a couple of the different tests, but there's actually nothing in them. So one thing I found with Gemini, with this task, it would create a lot of Python files, and then often it would say, this is where you will put the code that does this, instead of just actually writing the code. So Gemini, though, being the free tool, the newest one, I guess I wasn't too surprised by that. And I will show later, there's someone who has a blog where he's done the same types of tests, but he's tested them with all different types of tasks. And Gemini actually wins on some tasks. It's just not this task. It's not good at creating from scratch. It's very good at refactoring code, though. So if we then compare that to what Codex produced, so OpenAI's product. So here, if I go into the prompt, we'll start there. So now this is the like template for the system, for the prompt that each one will get, and it pulls data pulls in like what is the scale name, what are the subscales, because you have to have all that in the prompt to tell the AI how to answer it. It brings in all the demographic information. Well, actually, it only brings in 3 points of the demographic information. So within each of the personas that we got out of this data set, there are like 25 points of demographics. And there are also then, yeah, I guess I'll talk a little bit about the personas because some of this will make more sense. So each persona, they created 1,000 personas. Each persona has about 25 demographic characteristics. So you are a female of European descent, you are a teacher, your salary is this, you're not married, you went to like small liberal arts college, that type of information. Then they ask each of those personas 200 questions about things in the world, like what are your thoughts on teaching religion in schools? Each of the personas responded. They used another LLM to provide feedback on that response, and then they came to a final response. So for each persona, I have a data set of 200 questions that are supposedly representative of how someone with that persona would respond to those questions. And I wanted to use that then to provide more contextual detail to the model to say, your answering is this persona. Not only do you know these demographic facts, here are a sample of how they would typically respond to questions. Now answer all these psychological survey questions based on that. So what it does, it did pick up on that, and it has code here to actually include a sample of those persona responses. So it's getting closer to what I wanted. It also created like the utilities to create the prompt, though is pretty simplistic in a lot of these things. So it was getting closer to what I wanted than the prior one. But it still wasn't quite getting there. So then let's take a look at what Claude produced. So the file structures will look very similar because, again, I had told it kind of what I wanted. It didn't follow it perfectly, but that was probably better anyway. And Claude actually produced really good code that actually kind of worked the first time I ran it even. So that was good. I was happy about that. So now I was starting off with kind of a full set of code that I could then work from. We're also working with a computer science PhD student at Carnegie Mellon. So I had her evaluate the code too. So one of the lessons I learned from this is there's no good way to evaluate like what is better. It is more just preference. Like we looked at all the files and we were like, yeah, I think Claude wrote the better code because we had to select one to kind of then bring into our main branch and start actually editing from there and fine tuning it the way that we wanted it to work. So we ended up selecting Claude's code for doing that. But it probably saved us a good month worth of work. I mean, just setting up the structures alone and all where you want things to go. The utility functions that Claude wrote, I thought were really good. They were probably better than the ones out of Codex. And then we just had to spend a lot of time like figuring out where it had hiccups and this and that. Now, a lot of this is similar to what you would have with Cursor even before these were out there. So if you're already using Cursor, you're probably getting a lot of this functionality already. You may not be using it kind of from the raw, like just start a whole project, but it can do that within. But with these now, you can put them into any VS Code. So you don't have to pay Cursor $25 a month or whatever it is. So now if I go into my VS Code, like here, I can have Claude code running in my VS Code, and it's doing the same thing. It's working within whatever directory I am in, and it's going to ask for permissions and build files, edit files, and do all of that. So yeah, now you can have choices within. You can use Claude Code, you could use Gemini, or you could use Codex, and I'm sure others will come out. Cost-wise, the Gemini was free, so that won on costs hands down. I think it was under $1 for Codex to create all of that for me. And it was $3.68, I think, if I remember right, for Claude. Claude had an issue where it kind of built it and then it changed its mind and it kind of unbuilt it and then rebuilt it. And so it took a while longer. Gemini was like 10 to 12 minutes. Claude was probably closer to 20 minutes, just kind of running in the background, doing its thing, asking me lots of questions, like, can I have access? Like when it decided to delete all those files, it kept having to ask me, can I have permission to delete this directory? Can I have? Now there is one that you can push that says like, accept any of these recommendations, but I wasn't quite willing to just give it full control of my computer. Like I wanted to answer those. But that is a threat with them, is that after clicking yes 20 times, you stop paying attention to exactly what it's asking. And it could be asking for a directory that you don't want it to have access to.
So what are your thoughts? Is it cheaper to do it through VS Code and the direct integration, or do you think Cursor AI still has an advantage? I mean, maybe I'm a bad vibe coder, but when I've tried to do it directly paying for tokens, I end up spending a lot of money.
Yeah, I guess I would say it probably depends on how much structure you already have in place. So like with the 8 pages, it did a pretty good job. I think you can cut the cost down a lot. If you're starting without a really solid idea of what you want, you're going to be going back and making a lot more changes and edits. And like I knew from the beginning that I wanted the PyTest integrated into it. So I didn't have to do more calls later. That was just all part of those front loads. But if you didn't know that and you went in and you want to make a lot of changes, then you would end up probably burning through quite a few tokens. I think the bigger advantage, the reason I would say I would use these over that is I don't do this every month either. But for Cursor, you're going to pay even for months that you don't use it. So like I did almost no coding like in May and June, but I would have paid for May and June. Whereas with this, I only pay when I use. So if I have 2 projects a year, I only pay twice a year. It just depends how much you're going in and using it. But yeah, all in all, I thought it was, again, it saved us a lot of time. It didn't get everything right, but of course we didn't know exactly what we were asking for at the beginning either. So it wasn't until I started running it and I saw what it was outputting that I was like, yeah, you know, that's not really the structure I want for the JSON file. Can we restructure that for easier data access? But I didn't know that until I had printed out, or no, I had run several JSON files and I could look at it and I was like, yeah, that is kind of clunky how we have scales and subscales and then items. Let's reorganize that in this other way. And better, yeah, a lot of those decisions you just don't know. But all in all, it does a really good job, I think, of creating those structures for you.
I like the idea of giving the same prompt essentially to multiple different LLMs and seeing what they come up with before deciding on one to move forward. Usually I just tool around with one until I hit a point of failure and then I'll switch. That's a much more structured approach. What was the original database that you were working with? That was also generated by LLMs? What's the one with the personas?
Yeah, so the personas one. Yep, bye Farhana. Yeah, so I know of two personas work going on. The first one is at Stanford, and they have personas where they interviewed people and then used transcripts of those interviews to create digital personas, LLMs out of them. But their lawyers have said they can't let other people access that because there's too much liability, they think, because you could convince it to tell you kind of enough information to track out who the actual person is. And the people did not sign waivers for that part of it, I guess. But they're working through that. And it's been like a year there were. But then I found this data set, which is through a group called SynthLabs AI. And it's not open source, but if you write them and say, I want to do something researchy with this, like the next day you get access to it. So they are having some gatekeeping just to see how people are utilizing it. But basically what it is, here, let me go to something more in the middle. So like, so this is what the data set is you get. So you get these demographic factors. Then you get the question that was asked, you get the original response, you get the critique, and then it goes back and it gives you the final response, which they call the data. And you get 200 of those for each of the personas. And they have 1,000 personas. So you have like this huge question data set. Now if I actually wanted to simulate people, this would probably not be a good data set for that because none of these were ever real people. This was all just LLMs doing their things. But for a factor analysis, we don't think that we have to have real people because it's just a statistical process where we're looking at how numbers. So now what we're doing is now that we built the base code, and this was like 2 weeks ago, so this is all in sequence and happening. Now we have to figure out how to see if they're behaving the way that we think they should behave based on past data. So what we're planning to do, and that was this table that came up first. So we're going to be doing runs with different models using different conditions in different instruments, and then looking like if we have two instruments that we know from past validation studies should be highly correlated, are two LLMs that we think should be highly correlating on those instruments. Likewise, if they should not be correlated, are they not correlating? So are we getting the right differentiation? Doing tests for like variations of scores. Also looking at any past validation studies that have demographic data available. So like, should a male in their 50s be getting these types of score profiles? And then do our males in our 50s get those similar score profiles? So that's kind of where we are to see how closely we're mimicking real human behavior. But again, for a factor analysis, that's only a little bit part of it. The bigger part is just having enough of it that you can do the factor analysis, which is a little different than trying to then extrapolate to real people. And that's would be a whole nother series of things we would have to do if we went beyond doing the factor analysis part of this research. So if I go back then to my terminal, oh, it still is asking me questions. So, but this is pretty much how it works for 10 minutes. It keeps asking you questions. It does things. So it's planning. I'll just hit yes too. And it'll go through and it'll keep telling you like what it's doing. So it created a virtual environment. It installed PyTest into that virtual environment. I guess now it actually wants to start the virtual environment, it looks like. So this is why I say it gets dangerous. Like it keeps asking you a lot of small questions and you kind of get in the habit of saying yes a lot. So now it's actually going to start creating some of the files for this to be done. And this looks almost identical to what you would see if you were in Claude or if you were in Codex. The interface is pretty similar because it's command line. There isn't too much to show. So yeah, that's what I wanted to show. JP, you probably use Cursor the most. Have you been doing this type of work with Cursor or?
I think we changed the clock for heavily using clock controls.
Oh, okay. Through the command line, or you mean
CLI, yes.
through the CLI?
Yeah, through the and I have a very interesting spectrum. So
Oh, okay.
just
Let me
want to-
stop sharing and then you can.
Oh, I'm not in the room. I'll just message you on
Oh, okay.
So I just listen. I just shared with you. It's running. Okay, listen.
There it is.
This is what I've been working. Like last night, I want to develop a new function for survey down, and so I tried to like this is one very kind of aggressive move that I want to do for Claude Code because I poured my full request within one single message. Like I think this is maybe 1,000 words that contains a lot of information. And luckily, after this one prompt, Claude Code figured it out without me correcting it. Like after this prompt, the job is done. Like the function with the oxygen documentation and also like also the interconnection with between this function and also the existing internal functions are all working without me correcting it. This doesn't happen very often because for most of the time I need to correct it over and over again. So this is the time that I want to heavy test how Claude Code can go. And this is like one successful example. But I tried to get into super details. I also wrote like bullet point 1, 2, 3 and step. Like see, I even went to 7 and then I started another list with also 1, 2, 3 and stuff. And then I showed the like at the bottom, I also showed like how I want to use this function call. So it's very complicated, but it gets the point. So yeah, I think it's pretty smart. I think it's one of the best agents we can use. I also tried Gemini and also Codex, and for me, Claude Code is the best.
Yeah, it definitely performed best on our task, but I think your point is just like what I found. It took 8 pages of details to tell it what I wanted.
Yes.
You can't just say like,
Do it.
make me an app
Yeah.
that does this, period, go. You have to be able to say, so I think that's, at least for the time being, still going to be the case where you have to have some experience to know what to ask for.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what to ask for, you're not going to probably get that close to it.
So coincidentally, purely by coincidence, last Friday, some colleagues sent an email out to some, a group that I was on, and they're like, hey, we've been developing this little web app. Would you take a look at it and just critique it and answer some questions about pedagogy and stuff like that? So, of course, an hour later and an email that's like, 3 pages long, like this, and this. So what I ended up doing was I sort of suggested to them, I think there's some stuff that's needed for this. And then what I did is I had loaded Ollama, just the desktop on my machine, and I'm like, Ollama, what would it take to build this functionality? And it wasn't quite, I need an app. but it certainly wasn't the level of detail or
Yeah.
domain expertise. I don't even, like, when I see code, I recognize it, but like, can I evaluate, is this good code or not? But it was even beyond the code, it was like, what are the services required? Like, what's the stack to make this happen? And it did something that at some point, I don't know if today's the right time, but I would love to get you guys to critique. And really the question is like, you guys are domain experts in the code and you can evaluate this stuff. What happens when a village idiot like me starts trying to build apps using AI? So.
Well, I think that's where I want to go. I think in 2 weeks or maybe 4 weeks, I have another slot for vibe coding and what I called auditing your vibe code. Because that's, I think, what I found with it is, again, since I have written more code, I can go in and see like but someone else was writing, especially about like using this for scientific processes. Like the outputs can look fine,
Right.
but how they got there is not fine. And it only worked in that one particular. It's like, how do you use
Yeah,
a
not-
variety of tests to figure out where your code actually may be giving you the right output, but not getting it through the right process, which turns out to be really critical for science because the process is, there's a lot of ways you could get to what looks to be like a good number, but it's not the right number, and that can cause problems for engineering and.
For what it's worth, what I did, there's a repo for it. That basically is a roadmap for how to build this
Oh,
particular thing. And I'd be happy to share it at some point.
If you took the roadmap, then we could put it into one of these and see what it actually builds.
Yeah, it gave some code samples, like there's some
Yeah.
specific things, I haven't tested any of those to see if they actually work.
Yeah.
One thing I'll also note, probably none of you are using anything as trivial as this, but Olama, the desktop version, when you copy and paste, it does not copy the markdown, it's just like, so I had to redo all the markdown for my notes in GitHub. So that, but it was good because of actually doing that, I had to read the whole thing. Like it
Yeah.
generated a lot of, I think there's like 12 sections in this document that sort of, and I did about 3 passes on it. There's the initial pass. And then I said, okay, when they talk about specific sources of data, I had a specific set of sources. I was like, rewrite this section with these sources. And then it actually ended up rewriting a couple of other sections because it was like, how do you scrape those sources? And
Yeah.
it's sort of a different set of stuff. And then at the end, I was like, okay, it's talking about invoking all these different things. What would that cost me for all these services I need for something that can handle 1,000 users? Yeah. X number of queries per user, and what's the cost to build and maintain that? So
Yeah.
it was just an exercise that I did for my own curiosity, because I wasn't sure could an idiot like me actually like, do something kind of quasi magical or mystical.
And you could. Well, you can do other things that are more
It's
mystical.
amazing what you can get done with very limited sort of basic knowledge, but you have to keep prompting. Like,
Yeah.
what's good about your strategy is like, you know what you want, you have 8 pages of instructions, so it comes out pretty close to good or usable the first time.
Yeah, that doesn't feel like vibe coding.
Yeah, whereas if you're constantly, iterating and having a back and forth in the LLM, that entire context is being sent back to the LLM every time, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where you start, that's why you burn through tokens, which is partially why, if you don't know what you're doing, Cursor can be really advantageous.
Yeah, and I think
It's limit
in,
of $20 a month, yeah.
well, and yeah, and I'd say that what I did recognize too is how I would use it in my research is very different than how I would use it. Like if I wanted to create a web app that did something. Because there I would start out more generic, like I know what I want kind of at the end and I have to figure out how to get there. But hopefully with your research, you kind of know what has to get done in the first place. You're not,
Yeah.
and you know how to, like the series of measurements and stuff and the way you want the statistics done ahead of time. You don't want to just have it figure that out for you, because that turns out to be really important.
Yeah, it's all almost like pre-registering your stuff.
Yeah.
It's nice for reproducibility as well to have the instructions.
So real quick, the last thing was this blog I found, and I can post the URL somewhere. But they did like 5 different tests across Cursor, Claude, Gemini, and OpenAI. And then he kind of rated them in terms of where they had their different strengths and limitations. I did learn from that I didn't realize before. With Cursor, it is actually, so it reads your code base, then it creates a RAG of that. So it utilizes that. So it creates a whole like RAG model on your local that it's using to pull from your code base. Whereas Gemini, if it pulls your code base, it just has it all in the context window. But they have the biggest context windows. So Gemini can actually know your whole, if you have a big code base, it could keep all of that, quote, in memory. Whereas Codex and Claude Code work on a much smaller context window, and they're referring back to it a lot more. So you burn through a lot of tokens because of that too, where it's continually going back to find things in the code base to make reference to. So that's why, at least according to this person, he thought Gemini did the second best job, almost as good as Cursor for refactoring code, because it could hold the whole code base in and say, like, you're duplicating functions in these 3 places. Let's clean that up.
When he's
Whereas that's
evaluating
harder.
Cursor, is it like the auto mode for Cursor, like I think they have multiple.
He
different
has
options.
everything, like which model he used and all of that,
Yeah.
like which options he selected for. It's a very good assessment of them. And again, it's end up, there probably going to be strengths and weaknesses to each of them. Well, you'll want to use different ones for different tasks. In the end, is my
Share
guess.
that in the Slack.
Yeah, I can post that to the Slack.
I was gonna make a comment that I felt like, I don't know what the definition of vibe coding is. Someone tweeted it once and now it's a thing, but I always associate it with like, I know very little about how to do what I want to do, but I know what I want, so I'm gonna just have it figure it out for me. And this is like, at least Ping Fan's example that he showed was more like just how to use AI to do good software engineering. It's like we actually know our code base very, very well. We know our language extremely well. We know precisely what we want. And what you didn't see was we had a 2-hour conversation before that prompting, like where we both discussed exactly what is the best way that we should solve this problem, what is the exact behavior we want to achieve. And that 2-hour conversation turned into like a 5-bullet list in a Slack message that then he took and turned into extremely detailed instructions. So it was like, that is like the opposite of vibe coding. That is like, that's how you do software engineering, right? We had to think through all the possible things we wanted. And then after doing all that work, okay, then you can automate the code to do all of that. But we were so specific because we had already thought through it all. Whereas vibe coding is like, I want an app that does this in JavaScript. I don't even know JavaScript. Let's go and see what happens. And then you spend 3 hours just, iterating over what's this error message mean. You can still get to something pretty cool with it, but it's like I feel like that's like a very different mindset versus doing the thinking ahead of time and then just getting an awesome result because you've already done the thinking. I'm trying to get my students to do more of that kind of coding. Like think through and solve the problem, then it's easy. Then the AI knows what to do.
Yeah, you're still doing all the engineering. You're just outsourcing the coding part of it.
Right. So it can be like this expertise amplifier that's this magical device. That's what we're experiencing as we build SurveyDown because we're thinking through things in a very detailed way before we touch the code. And we're just having it automate that last leg for us so we don't have to, save our fingers.
Do you guys have any insights about when to use command line versus VS or?
We both are using Positron a lot more these days, which is more of a data science type IDE made by Posit. But I still use a lot more of what PingFan displayed, like that workflow of having Claude Code be in my terminal that can now see my whole project. And I use that a lot. because that's the kind of problem we're solving. Is we're like sort of architecting these things, and it's really nice if it can see the whole project and have that understanding of what you're working on. That's become a sort of go-to. So I don't actually use Cursor much anymore. I guess I could, but you know, I pay for Claude, so I'm just going to pay for one thing, and it works really well for this kind of thing.
I still use Cursor a lot, and I just let it access the terminal as much as it needs to.
Yeah, I guess a lot depends how comfortable you are with command line. Like, how often do you have to look up your Linux commands? Like, there's still enough pain to me that I use VS Code more because I don't know my Linux commands. Just like they don't just come to me like that. Like, make a directory, remove a directory. I hate copying directories. I'm always afraid I'm going to copy it to the wrong place. But for people who are good at it and can type fast like JP, I'm sure the command line's just amazingly faster.
Same thing with GitHub. Like, if I try to do it myself, I'm gonna get something tangled up, you know, it's gonna take me data to,
Yeah,
you know, to resolve it, but.
But in
yeah,
VS
can
Code,
do
I
it
just
right
click.
away.
and it does it. I'm like, whoop, it's done.
So if you have the Claude subscription, what do you mean, like the $20 a month subscription to Claude, that you can use that in Claude Code?
Yeah.
Or you open separately?
Yeah, no, that just comes with it. I mean, that's my understanding. That's what I'm only paying 20 bucks a month, and I use Claude Code all the time inside Positron, or it doesn't matter what really, but anything that has a terminal. So it works really well in Positron because that's essentially it's no different than VS Code. It's built on top of VS Code. So works really well. Just type Claude, hit enter, and start going.
Does anybody know if the university has plans to get Claude for faculty and students?
I have no idea.
No mention
I
of
don't-
it. I doubt
I
it's
don't think they have
coming.
any money for anything right now.
Yeah, no one wants a proposal that says this is going to cost us more for something. It doesn't matter what the something is, I think, at this point right now.
I didn't think, I hadn't heard anything to that effect, and I'm only asking because I had one of my faculty asking for Claude, and I'm like, well, what's the use case? Because we've already got Copilot and Gemini, so like, you know, if you're gonna ask for the school to pay for another LLM.
Yeah,
Need to understand like what, you know, why are we doing this?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't see them doing that, like exactly what you just said. We've already got stuff that the school offers. You either take it or leave it. Use something else if you want to pay more for it. We don't even have Overleaf. I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Like, there's a real use case. I just, right now, it seems like how the models are evolving is changing so fast and furious that like to invest in any one of them, it's like, yeah, next month it won't be the best at this and there'll be something else. And sort of like, I don't think we can keep just, you know, changing courses.
Well, and what is this varies so greatly across the university.
Yep.
Like, Claude is really good at coding, but I think for just general writing, GPTs are still better.
Right.
And for other tasks, Gemini might be better. I don't know. And Gemini's lagged a little behind, but people do seem to like it for some very specific tasks. So if they opened up that floodgate, we'd have to buy all the models, because I don't think everyone would say, oh, I want Claude.
Right.
Other people would say, oh, I want GPT.
Right.
Why are you paying for their Claude and won't pay for my GPT?
Right.
I'm not an administrator, but I think there's very little that the university should pay for in the way of software, you know, because first of all, there's so many open source alternatives to commercial software. Second, everybody's use of programs is different, you know, or LLMs in this case, and it's 20 bucks a month, you know. I'd rather see that money just be saved and used for research funding.
Yeah, so most of it, at least the conversations I've been in, IT is trying to focus on how to support not just academic use of these, but also administrative use of these.
Yeah.
And how to help the administration understand where They have processes that could benefit from different types of models.
Yeah.
They also have Box AI. Which we get as part of our Box package already, which is secure, so you could use it even with secure data. So like if you had a student file and you were trying to do advising, you could build a pipeline where it could all happen within Box AI and it would stay within what has been approved as a secure space.
Right.
So it may not even be any of these tools. Now, I don't know what they're using on the back end of Box AI as their base model.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's kind of, it gets really complicated because as you were saying, it's changing so fast. Like a year ago, Box didn't have an AI component. Now they do, and you can do different things with it, is my understanding. I haven't actually used it, but it's supposed to be really powerful for everything that you have in Box. And that is the one most approved. Like you can use Box for your research data. You can't use Google Docs for your research data even.
Right.
So if you wanted to do these things, Box is the place to do it.
Yeah.
Now, is their AI any good? I have no idea.
Right.
For the tasks that I would want to do. So I think that's going to be a lot of what we'll see coming out of IT is like how to use tools that we're already using, but focusing more on how do you think about where within the process and workflow you're applying them. Because I think that's still a big area where none of us have a good understanding. Like my job is scheduling. Where does AI fit into scheduling? That's not an easy question to answer. And you have to really understand scheduling to even go near answering it. And most of us don't. So how do you have that conversation with someone who understands scheduling to say, here's how you could do scheduling more efficiently. But here are the weaknesses. Here are the things you have to look out for as a human because it will make these errors frequently.
Right.
And that's not an IT thing to do. Who does that? No one seems to know. But we have to get there at some point because, yeah, scheduling is a mess to do.
I suspect what will happen is some company will come up with a product that's AI-based scheduling it and sell it to the university.
I would say they will try to